Another week with more streaming from home options, starting with the half of it on Netflix. And I've been describing it as Cyrano de Bergerac, but with teens in 2020. And so it's got a person of color as the protagonist, which is delightful. And it's also got people on multiple ends of the sexuality spectrum, which is another refreshing update to it. But the story itself, the core story, is certainly something we've seen before. It takes place in a small town, and there's a boy, and he likes a girl, and he's not good at expressing himself. And so he enlists our protagonist, a character named Collin Chou, who just so happens to be like the only Asian kid in town, to help him express to this girl how he feels. And then the fun twist is that Ellie herself discovers a lot about herself and, that she has feelings for this girl. And I think the thing I like about it the most is, again, the plot itself is something that is well trod, but it takes a lot to distract me these days in a good way, right? I find, I don't know about other people, but it's hard to sit down and watch a movie and not be distracted by your phone being there or your computer being there or just everything going on. I think that is one of the advantages to a movie theater experience. Sometimes it's a disadvantage because if it's a bad movie, you're just like, I can't escape, oh God. But when it's a good movie, it helps enhance that. But when you're sitting at home, you really have to pay attention to something. And it turns out that the lighthearted nature of this actually got me more engulfed and more enamored with the story than some of the heavier stuff I've been watching, because I was just like, oh, this is fun. Oh, this is distracting. Oh, I can follow along. Oh, it's sweet. I don't have to think in a good way, and I am being rewarded because their emotions are real and like there's actual character development in this. And a lot of the themes, the more diverse themes, I think it wants to explore, like it doesn't go too far into those, and it's a light touch, and I actually think that works to its advantage here, because again, I think if it was like a serious, heavy film that's going to cover, like sexuality and being a minority in a completely homogenous town, like that can get really dark really fast. But it's also nice to have stories that are not, depressing about this sort of stuff. The other thing, I thought this movie did a really good job of capturing cultural experiences through food. And even if it's like a brief snippet or a moment, and food and meals, I should say, like eating meals. And like, I love there's a scene where, the guy who likes girl, like you just pop into a family dinner of his and it's just like chaos. And it's loud screaming, blah, blah, blah. And it's what my understanding of a lot of like basically larger white, particularly Catholic or Christian in this case family, is like that's like a typical Sunday type dinner for them. Or then you've got like teens in a diner and like what that kind of quote Americana experience is growing up. And just I think the settings and the food and the way that characters interact during eating felt really real to me. And I it's such a specific thing, but anything that's a gateway into an experience and that helps you connect is great. And there's a lot of like slightly hyperbolic stuff where like overall super cute, fun, quick watch with there are like moments that, especially if you are, again, an immigrant, a family of immigrants, somewhere on the rainbow spectrum of sexuality, like there are definitely extra moments for you that you'll really relate to. But even if you don't connect with any of that, love is love, unrequited crushes, it's all universal. So I'm going to give it 4.3 out of 5. Next up, I have a documentary called Spaceship Earth, and it's might be a little tough to watch right now just because it's about a bunch of people who opted to go into a pseudoscience experiment that they isolated themselves for 2 years and basically simulated, what would it be like to live in a closed environment in preparation to live on the moon or Mars or colonize or something like that. And I kept waiting for something more out of this movie. It takes too long to get into the kind of meat of it, of these people engaging in this experiment, which was called Biosphere 2, which I'm like just a little bit too young to remember in the news cycle. Like I was alive during it, but it wouldn't have been on my radar. But there's a lot of moments where it's like it seems like it was a really big cultural phenomenon at the time, and so I kept waiting for some sort of crazy reveal. Right, like they set it up. It's this art. It's actually started by an artist commune in, of course, the Bay Area. Like, of course, they ended up all meeting in San Francisco. And I can say this as someone from the Bay Area, like these are my people. I don't know. But, so it wasn't started by scientists per se. It was started as sort of more like utopian, like, let's see what we can do, man. And I was like, cool, it's going to be a disaster and they're all going to turn on each other, and was waiting for that to happen. And then they like actually got scientists involved. I was like, cool, it's actually going to be like a science experiment. It's going to have led to, discoveries and breakthroughs. And then they're like, no. And then they get funding from billionaires. I was like, cool, it's going to be some sort of crazy, like, follow the money scheme. And it just kept, like, hit after hit of these things where I was just, like, waiting for something to happen, and then nothing ever pays off. And maybe that's the point, right? Like, maybe that was the point of it, in that it's just a thing, and it failed, and good for these people who are remain friends to this day. And like there are a couple moments where I was just like, what the what? Like Rue McClanahan shows up at one point and they talk about all the media coverage, and they were like making like a bunch of press materials about this experiment. And I was like, cool, it's going to be about how there was all the fraud and the media and everyone turned on them. Nope. And then Steve Bannon shows up at some point and you're just like, what is happening here? But again, the payoffs just aren't there for me. So it could be like an interesting background watch potentially, but like in terms of, again, going back to like the half of it where it's something that was actually light and it kept my attention through, like Spaceship Earth, I was struggling with. And maybe if I was not currently watching it in my own mini biosphere too, but not even, because I don't have enough outdoor space like they do, or like pseudo outdoor space, but I would feel more warm towards this. But overall, I was just disappointed in the lack of closure and the lack of kind of point to it. And the thing is, like, I think you can have a documentary that's more vignette or slice of life, but this kept setting itself up as something plot driven and then not delivering on that. So I'm only going to give it 3 out of 5. And then finally, I have How to Build a Girl, and I wanted to like this movie a lot, and I didn't. And I didn't dislike it per se, but so basically, it stars Beanie Feldstein, who I think is a great actress. Like, I love Beanie Feldstein, and I certainly love that this film, movies like Booksmart, which she also stars in, shows like Never Have I Ever, even movies like The Half of It. Like, there is a revolution on screen right now, and it's not even a revolution, but there's just like the normalizing of sexuality of teenage girls, and with them having agency as opposed to, dudes objectifying them. So I'm all for that. And I think this character certainly embodies that. Basically, the premise is there's a character takes place in England. She's 16. It's in like the 90s, I think, the early 90s. And she comes from like a pretty not well-off background. And in order to help supplement money for her family, she becomes a rock writer, like a rock reviewer. Okay, fine. Living fantasy. It's based on a book, which I think is supposedly semi-autobiographical, but also pretty fictional. And it's definitely wish fulfillment. It's definitely all this stuff. So again, going back to, I like that, women have agency and power over their sexuality on screen, especially young women right now. Like, I think that's normal and fine and great and helps. But there's something about this that just like did not come off well. Like, I love Beanie Feldstein and other things. Oh, like Lady Bird. I think she's amazing in Lady Bird, but she cannot do a British accent. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe it's a perfect British accent and I just do not have the ear for it. But from the second she started speaking, I was just like, what? Oh, this isn't a joke. This is her actually doing this accent. Oh, she's going to hold it through the whole film. Ew. And I do not think she could act through the accent. And so the moments when she's not talking and just emoting and acting, I thought were much stronger when she's just struggling or pushing through this accent. There were some other creative devices that tried to explore. There was like an Amelie-esque thing where portraits of famous people were talking to her as kind of her support system. There is a journey for her. Like, she goes through an evolution of, stepping into, she has a pen name, it's Dolly Wilde, and becoming this character and then realizing that like this character has taken over. There's also a whole subplot where Alfie Allen plays a rock star. He's key to the plot. And I was reading the synopsis of the book after having seen the film because I was like, I feel like we missed a bunch of steps in their relationship in this film, and the book makes it sound like it was spread out. It was actually like a natural thing. This movie tries to condense too many parts that the pacing just gets off in terms of like character development, and it spends too long on one bits and like not enough time on other things. So overall, like, I really wanted to like it. I really did. And maybe people who are more music people than I am will appreciate it more. I like music, but I'm not like a music person. So overall, I'm going to give it a 3.2 out of 5. I think if you had to pick anything this week, pick The Half of It.